Just so excited to be here with y'all and speak with you on resumes and interview tips and tricks.
And for those that have not come to our last session, my name is Shearer. I'm part of the talent acquisition team. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years now.
And I'm Sevin, also a part of the talent acquisition team. Been with Amwins over 1.5 years now. Couldn't imagine being anywhere else. My background's actually in higher education. I worked in student affairs before coming to insurance, so this is such a treat to be here with y'all today.
And this could be more of a laid-back conversation. We're here to help you figure out what works, what doesn't work, answer any questions you might have. So if you do have any questions, let us know. If you don't want to ask it in front of everyone, let us know afterwards. We can definitely set up time to speak with you, or if you want to catch up right afterwards, we can do that as well.
Alrighty.
So we're covering the resume and interview tips and tricks. Everyone's been through some type of interview at some point in your life. As you know, it can be a little intimidating to start. So the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get. These are just some tips to help you get started. Okay, so the first one is just, have a clean resume. Don't make the recruiter, whoever is reading your resume, try to figure out what's going on. Have it clear, have it organized, have it concise. Bullet points are going to be your best friend. Don't do paragraphs. People aren't going to read paragraphs. They're going to see, okay, this person has a clean resume. They did the work that goes into it. They're prepared. Let's see what their meat is to the jobs or to their experience. If you didn't have a job yet, since you're in school, talk about any organizations. If you were in leadership, add that onto your resume. Anything that you can showcase yourself is really, this is your time to shine and prove that, hey, I am a qualified candidate for this role. Consider me.
Absolutely, and I know it can be tempting, especially if you're one of the marketing majors that raised your hands. You want to show off your skills, right? You want everything to speak to your ability, so it's easy to think, well, my resume's got to be, super flashy and eye-grabbing. But just from the point of view of recruiters, it can be really difficult to kind of decipher the actual information on that resume when there's a little bit too much going on visually. And I know there were some conversations going on about applicant tracking systems, depending on the company you apply for. Sometimes those more obscure fonts or even graphics, even a photo can flag the applicant tracking system, and sometimes it won't display correctly, so all the hard work you put into that beautiful resume may not show, or the system might actually kind of pop it out because it sees something as a red flag, especially if there's a picture in a resume. I know there's a big debate on should we put our picture on our resume or not. I know I was always told in school when I took HR classes that it was a little bit of a no-no, just because of course it can, big companies are more open to lawsuits, and also just you don't want to give, any impression of yourself before you get to actually speak with the hiring leader.
Do any of your professors encourage that? So make sure before okay. Awesome. So the most important thing is obviously who you are. So make sure you include your name, your full name, not your nickname, not what you go by, just your full name, because that's going to be or the tracking system, that's going to be how we tell who you are. Definitely include your phone number or your best contact. If you have an obscure email address, maybe create a new one. Don't put that on your resume. It will follow you. I'm not a big one on actual full addresses. I like to know the city and the state. I don't need to know your home address. I don't think anyone needs to know that. Especially put that on LinkedIn. You just don't want anyone to see where you live. So I would say put in your town, or if you are trying to apply to a school or a job in a different city, put that city. Recruiters love to see people in that city apply. If you're moving there, you would definitely want to show this is an interest. I'm set on moving to Dallas, Texas. Put Dallas on your resume.
Absolutely, and keeping it updated with your experience is so important, especially when you're going out for new opportunities. But even if you're not going out for a new opportunity, you never know when a new opportunity is going to present itself. So you want to make sure that you're prepared. You don't want to have to go back to your resume from 5 years ago and think, what have I done in the past 5 years? Because you will definitely draw a blank. Because it's not just about that professional experience, also speaking on different activities you've been involved in and projects. Those can go on your resume as well, and it's easy to forget those, to include them when you don't keep adding them on the spot. So I always say whenever something big comes up, it's something you're proud of, just go ahead and throw it on there. That way when that great opportunity comes up, you never know when it's coming and you're going to be ready.
And to speak on that, definitely update if you are no longer with the company. Just say hey, it's not present anymore. I ended in May 2022. So when the recruiter calls you, hey, are you still at this position? You're like, actually, no, I haven't been there for a few months. Okay, so what have you been doing? Are you looking for a new job? Are you at a new company? It just takes a lot of that guessing work, and the first conversation, you don't have to have it catching them up to speed.
Absolutely. And proofread your final resume. We find typos all the time in resumes, and hey, we're human, it happens. We all make mistakes. But proofreading your resume yourself, but I highly recommend finding someone you trust to proofread it for you as well. It's easy when you look at your resume over and over and over again. Your eyes just kind of gloss over certain things. You don't notice certain details. So it's really important to have kind of a second pair of eyes to dig into it for you and say, hey, you may not want to include that, or hey, why didn't you include this, or hey, there's a little typo here. You never know what your eyes won't catch. So definitely make sure you have a second pair of eyes as well.
And I actually like using peers that are in the industry that I'm either trying to get into or are currently in. I do definitely use a trusted source, but I try to have someone that has a different viewpoint as me, so I can see what am I missing, how can I market myself better.
Absolutely. Oh, and of course, important to include your name and contact information. You probably won't believe it, but I have gotten resumes before that didn't have a name on them. Some people just forget if you use a template and it says first and last name and it's late at night, you're staying up perfecting that resume, you would be surprised at how many people after a few too many cups of coffee forget to put their own name on their resume. It does happen. So make sure your name is present and of course your contact information. If we like what we see, we definitely want to reach out to you. And like Jennifer mentioned, the email, if you don't have one that's a little cleaner, maybe more professional, definitely want to create one of those. And of course, while you're in school and just graduated, your school email is fine as well, as long as you're making sure to check it regularly.
That's usually how recruiters reach out the first point, is through email. It's just easier to, not blindside with someone with a phone in the office who answers calls that are known to them. So it's usually the first point of contact. Check them, check your spam. Some of the applicant tracking systems do send them to your spam. Your email just might be like, hey, I don't recognize this. So if you're expecting some type of feedback, if you apply, just continuously check all your folders. And then education and grade date. So this is actually a big part of your resume, especially as entering that workforce. Put that at the top. I want to see who you are, what you're doing. If you're a student, awesome. That helps us kind of narrow down what type of positions you're looking for. It's hard when you see thousands of resumes every week, every month, whatever it may be, scrolling through many pages just to find some of the simplest information that you should see at the top. After graduation, after a couple of years, I would actually, this is actually a new topic we've been hearing, is I would take off that graduation date. Focus more on your experience. Put that experience at the top. That's what you've been doing most recently. That's what you're going to be able to talk to. Your question?
So for your education, so if you have like multiple certificates and degrees, do you put the one that they're looking for at the top first, or the one with the greatest significance first?
So the question was, if they have certificates, where do you put that? I typically add that with education if it's relatable. If it's more volunteering and more certificates, I have an own section for all of that together. It's subjective. Everyone's resume is going to be different. It's whatever's cleanest and easiest to show your skills and your experience. I don't know if you have.
Absolutely. No, I like that. I like the idea of putting the certificates that are relevant to the job you're applying for at the top. I think is great. That's what's going to catch our eye when we scroll from top down and we want to see, or have you been, getting certifications? Are you qualified in whatever way? We're going to hit that with our eyes first. So I definitely like the idea of putting, that certificate that's relevant to the job you're applying for at the top. And you can tailor your resume to different jobs as well, and we'll touch on that.
So go ahead.
I have a question about skill sets. A lot of students come to me for advice on their resumes, and very often I'll see their skills of proficient in Microsoft Word and Excel. Pretty much everyone with a college degree knows how to do those things. Is there any value in putting that on there?
It really depends on the role. I know, personally for Amwins with like brokerage roles, we absolutely look for Excel, but it's really role specific. Like you said, I don't know if that's really applies to every industry. It's kind of expected that you're going to have those technical skills.
I would focus more on the skills that are actually listed in the job description, and if they're transparent to yourself, I would showcase those ahead of Excel, because at this point, everyone's going to have a class on it, have that exposure at some point in their career or college career. So the work experience, if you don't have any, especially in school, you might have a part-time job, talk to that. If you are on a sports team, talk to that. You never know where that experience is going to come from. So if you think you have experience that's applicable, put that on there. Be able to talk to it. Put some bullet points. Really showcase why you think this is a relevant experience.
Absolutely. Everything kind of ties in together in some way, even when you don't realize it. The things you do, extracurriculars like sports. I love hearing students speak on that, how they got to practice their leadership skills or, team building. Those things are important. Everything that you're doing in your life is intentional, and it's great to see as an interviewer, recruiter, that you have been conscious of that. You have been intentional about the things you're doing, and you're kind of tying it back into your professional life as well.
And as far as setting up your experience, put your most recent at the top and then work backwards from there. It just, again, helps us figure out what's going on, what's your story, what are you doing, instead of scrolling back. Also, I'm not sure what your professors are teaching you. You don't need a 9-page resume. I'm going to be very honest about that. 2 is probably the max limit right now. If you can fit it on 1 page, awesome, but I would not go above 2.
With work experience, so would you say you're working in tech, right? And you have work experience in tech, obviously put that on there, but you worked in a different industry during that time because you couldn't find an opportunity during that time. Would you put the both on there, or would you just put where you're trying to get in that for that specific job on your resume?
I don't see any problem with putting both, especially if it, keeps you from maybe potentially having a little bit of a gap there. You can show, hey, I was, working up to this great opportunity. You can always spin things in a positive light. Saying, hey, I was working up to that opportunity and took something that I needed to get by to find that right job for me. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
And you can actually state that on your resume as well. When we see gaps, I love when people just put a sentence like, hey, I took off to raise my kids for a few years, or hey, I took off to go back to school, whatever it may be. Like, put that on there. It just helps us kind of understand your story before actually having that chance to talk to you.
Would you put that directly on the resume, or would you put that in the cover letter?
Either one. Yeah, as long as you have it on there, you're going to say, like, this is what I've been doing, this is where I want to go. It helps us know what you're doing.
Because we likely will ask about it, just be curious, like, hey, what's going on between this time? So it's definitely good to make sure you set your own narrative. I try to go into interviews without any preconceived notions, just being completely open. But I know that's not the same for every recruiter out there at different companies. They can kind of get a narrative in their mind of what happened in that gap. Kind of helps you to get ahead of it and say, hey, here's what happened. I'm just going to be honest. And we're like, okay. I mean, if they've called you in for the interview after that, they know and they've accepted it, and it's all good.
And I can tell you, with COVID happening over the last couple of years, like, people have been laid off, people haven't been comfortable working, going back to school. As recruiters, we understand this. It's a lot different than how it was prior. Like, oh my gosh, 2 months gap, I'm not going to get a job. It's fine. It happens. It's life. I mean, you can't avoid that. So people are a lot more, especially recruiters, are a lot more understanding now than prior to the COVID. Prior to COVID, sorry.
Being so young, like, are we allowed to put high school stuff we achieved, or does that kind of look like bad on the resume? Because I worked for 4 years of high school, but then COVID hit, so there's like a break. Then, like, do I include those 4 years of work?
Gotcha. So the question was, if you've had work experience in high school, should you, being so young, should you include that as well? I mean, I really think you don't want the resume to be too long, but it kind of depends on the experience that you've gotten throughout college. If, let's say, you're junior or senior and you have a lot of other experience that kind of spans the resume, I don't think you'd have to go back quite so far. But if you're freshman, sophomore, and that is pretty relevant to where you are now, it's pretty recent, I would include it. It definitely shows that you've been, establishing, a path for yourself.
Yeah, and the more you get into your career, the more you're going to have things fall off your resume. So like my first job, I don't even include on my resume anymore just because I have more relatable experience at this point. But in college, I definitely had high school experience on the resume. So you'll continue to develop and your resume will form with you.
Yeah, you'll kind of notice like, oop, it's getting a little long. Might be time to trim it down, find what I can cut off of it, and make sure I have what's most relevant to the career that I want to pursue. But nothing wrong with including, especially if you're a freshman, sophomore.
So
we kind of touched based on this with some of the questions. I mean, straightforward. I would definitely have a segment on your resume that showcased, your extracurriculars, your achievements, your awards, whatever it may be. It's your time to shine. Definitely brag about yourself a little bit on your resume. It's your chance to do so. You want to set yourself apart.
Yeah, and I definitely look at that too. I'm always curious, like, what have they been up to and what have they achieved? So it may seem like, is anyone going to scroll down and look at this? Do they care? But, I do. We definitely do. We like to read it and really get a sense of who you are.
Especially like a firm that we're at, Amwins, we really kind of focus more on the individual. We can train you on insurance. No matter what role you go into, you're going to get training. You're going to gain that exposure the longer you're in that role. So we're looking more at, is this going to be a personality fit? We want to know who you are, and just having those extra bullet points really kind of paints that photo before we actually have that conversation.
Absolutely, and it could spark a conversation as well. You never know what kind of connections you're going to have between yourself and the recruiter. Something on your resume could spark something for them, and it starts a conversation, and next thing you know, 20 minutes later, you're like best friends. I mean, you never know what's going to relate to someone and kind of catch their eye and intrigue them. So, don't be afraid to brag on yourself a little bit. I know we always preach being humble, but, that's your time, like Jennifer said, to shine. So don't be afraid to brag a little bit on yourself.
So, we kind of touched point on all of this. Just to reiterate, just customize your resume. Don't use the same one for every job, because not every job is the same. Have a base, find out those keywords in the job description. I personally love seeing an objective at the top, 2 or 3 sentences saying why you're interested in this job, why you think you're going to be a good fit. It goes a long way. So having that will definitely set yourself apart. Focus on the education, especially as college students. That's really going to be your place to really start the momentum behind just painting your photo of who you are.
Absolutely. And jumping back to that tailoring your resume, I highly recommend having a base copy. We talked about this earlier, that kind of your general template of the big points about you, and then you can build off of that for each job you apply to. I love a good objective at the top of a resume too. I always read it, but the important part is that you're updating it for the jobs you apply to. There's nothing worse than you apply to a job and you're like, oh my goodness, I said I wanted a job in real estate, and this is a completely unrelated, it's a tech company or something completely unrelated. We read that and we notice and we're like, oh. So.
Yeah, so this is relating to objective. So is there a limit? I know they usually say to keep it up to a sentence. Is there a limit for that?
It's really personal preference and what's going to fit on your resume. I don't think there needs to be more than 3 sentences tops, and that would be shorter sentences.
Yeah. So the nice thing about resume building, it's so subjective. It's yours to create. So if you think you can get your statement across in a sentence, awesome. If it's going to take 3 to 4, not a problem. As long as it's not a book that the recruiter has to read, because I can tell you, they're not going to read a whole book. They're going to read just a few sentences. So the shorter, the more concise you can get, the better. 3
or maybe 2, 3 lines. If you find you're approaching paragraph territory, that's usually the time when you want to trim it back a little bit.
So should you have an objective if you're submitting a cover letter as well, to your resume?
So the question was, should you have an objective for your cover letter? Absolutely. That is
not on the cover letter on your resume.
Oh.
Some people have objective words
Oh, so did you have that in addition to the cover letter? I think so. You never know what a recruiter is going to read. We love cover letters, and we read them every time. We're moving towards a generation that maybe finds cover letters a little bit stuffy, but they're becoming more unusual, and that kind of makes you stand out. But you never know what kind of day a recruiter's having or what they're reading, so hitting it in the cover letter, but also hitting it in the resume, so no matter what they read first, what they decide to dive into, that statement is still there on both.
Any other questions before we move on?
So, work experience, showcase your skills, consider adding additional sections. Ooh, quantify. I like that one.
Yeah, so especially if you are interested more in that sales piece, add metrics you've hit. As someone in sales, we're going to have you hit metrics. You're going to have certain calls. You're going to have certain numbers you have to hit. So any evidence that you can put that you've done this, you're qualified, you're able to do it, add it on there. So as a recruiter, we add how many hires a year we put to our resumes. It just shows what you can produce and it just helps you kind of get that leg up compared to some of the other people that might be applying for the same position.
Yeah, and I know a lot of colleges are really great at relaying that to students, and working with students in the college space actually inspired me to redo my own resume, because y'all have some really amazing clean resumes, and I was like, I need to quantify my experience as well. So it just helps to kind of put what you're saying into numbers. It makes it make sense a little bit more than just a subjective statement. Action verbs. Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. And definitely the reverse chronological order. It's very, very difficult when experience on a resume is out of order. We have to kind of scroll down, and then we scroll up, and we're like, what happened when? And they were here, and then they were there. It's going to be a little more challenging to understand the progression of your career and experience. That's something that you want to relay in your resume. How have you grown? How have you progressed? We can only see that starting from the top, what are you doing now? And then we work our way down like, wow, they were really on the come up. Started off in a customer service position. Now they're, vice president of whatever you're doing. We really like to see that progression, and that's a lot easier in reverse chronological order.
So we included a resume just to kind of show you how clean it is. This is a student that's no longer in school, they're passed, but it shows their activities, their experience. You can see the activities stage is kind of the meat of the resume, because that's what they've been doing over the last 4 years. And they might not have had that opportunity to actually go outside and do experience outside of school. So they included everything that they were a part of, really showed that they were active, they were interested in growing their career, their social network.
I know a big question a lot of students have is GPA. Do I have to put my GPA on the resume? And again, unfortunately, we have to say that is subjective. If you have an outstanding GPA and you are proud of it and you want to showcase it, hey, put it on there. Absolutely. We love to see it. We love to see that you've been dedicated to your studies. If you're applying for something like an internship that has a GPA requirement, absolutely put it on there. That lets us know, oh, they hit that point right there. We know that they are able to take on this position. But if it's been a year or two after school, I don't really think you need the GPA anymore after that.
And a lot of companies don't necessarily use that as a benchmark anymore. They don't ask for transcripts. Some still will, but just do that research. Figure out what you need to include for that job itself. But yeah, if you have something that's not as, as high, I personally wouldn't put it on there, just because you can really showcase your skills elsewhere on the resume. Any questions about like how this looks, anything along these lines? Cool. So I do want to point out, this individual put the dates over to the right. That just helps us be able to see the time frame a little easier. You can definitely put it over more, but again, it's a little bit cleaner having the whole page used, and it's easier for the eyes to actually key in on certain times.
Ooh, the fun stuff, the dreaded interview.
So the biggest thing you can really do for yourself is prepare for an interview. The first interview is usually not the best interview. It comes with skill, or it comes with time. You build those skills, you figure out what works, what type of environments you're comfortable in, and you really start to just evolve with your interviewing skills. So the best way you can help yourself is do the research, prepare, get comfortable talking to yourself so you can see and hear how you sound. You don't get caught up in just, oh my gosh, this is what I sound like, I'm going to trip over the words. It's just going to help you be successful in whatever situation or interview it's going to be. It might be an in-person, face-on-face. It might be out at dinner. There's a lot of situations for interviewing, so just get comfortable with any situation you might be in.
Absolutely. And doing your research on the company, you best believe that recruiter is going to ask, hey, so what got you interested in us? What about our company aligns with your career goals? Do you see a path for yourself at our company? We will absolutely ask you some kind of variation of that question. And really what we're looking for is, have you done your research? Do you know what we do and how what you want to do fits into that? Because it's a partnership, right? We're kind of interviewing each other. We're interviewing you to know more about you, but you're also kind of interviewing us in a sense. Is this going to be a good fit for my personality? Is the culture going to be a good fit for me? So you absolutely want to make sure that you've done your research and can relay that to the recruiter to make them go, oh wow, Like they really know what they're talking about. They did their research. That's always really impressive.
And don't just stop doing research on the job and in the company. Actually research the interviewer. Figure out who you're talking to. Check out their LinkedIn. See their history. See if there's anything you can ask, just like, hey, what is your advice getting into this type of role? Or how did you get started? It really shows that you are interested, you want above and beyond, and you're ready to have a conversation and comfortable with knowing who you're going to converse with going into it.
Absolutely, and it makes it a lot more personal too. We're not offended by it. We're all people, right? You get a little nosy, you want to Google someone's name and see who you're going to be speaking with. Absolutely do that. You may find something on their profile on LinkedIn that you can go, hey, we went to the same school, or I was in that fraternity or sorority too. There can be those little connection points that you can kind of sneak into the conversation where the recruiter goes, oh my goodness, that was my alma mater, oh my gosh, and next thing you know, you're best buddies, and it's the best interview of your life. So don't be afraid to dig around a little bit and learn more about the company, but like Jennifer said, the recruiter or whoever you're talking with as well.
And then I would say one of the most important things you can do is have questions ready. I can't tell you the amount of times I've had individuals just come to me and I'm like, at the end, I'm like, is there any questions I can help you with? Like, I want to be, here as a resource. And they're like, nope, I'm good, thank you. I could have thought that was a great conversation, but then that just showed me they might not be interested. So having questions just shows that you are interested. You took that time. You want to continue that conversation. Might not be afterwards. You might decide it's not a good fit for you. But if it is, it's just going to continue that conversation moving forward.
Absolutely. And those questions can be related to like the actual job itself, the duties, the things you'll be doing, but it can also be related to company culture. We touched on how we're interviewing you and you're interviewing us. Don't be afraid to ask, what do you love the most about Amwins? What has your experience been, with your professional development? How have they invested in you? What's the culture like? Like, that's totally okay to ask those questions. That's why we do this. We love Amwins, we love what we do, and we love to speak on it. So it gets us really excited when people actually ask about the culture. That's so important for this generation, is you want to feel at home where you work. You're going to spend a lot more time with your work family, sometimes than you do with your own family. So that you want them to feel like people you can relate to and kind of vibe with. And you get a sense from that when you speak with a recruiter or hiring leader. So don't be afraid to dig into that a little bit and kind of see how they respond. It shows truly what they feel about the culture. Like I said, when we get those questions, we just light up and we're like, I could talk to you for 1,000,000 years about this. That's kind of the response you want to see.
And on the flip side, listen to what they say and how they answer those questions. Because if it's a red flag, acknowledge it's a red flag. You want to be at a company that respects the individuals and you respect them. It's definitely a mutual partnership. You don't want to get into a company like, this is not what I thought it was. I was not picking up on those key words or those feelings I might be feeling towards it. Listen to yourself, listen to the person you're talking to, and really just go from there.
And prepare answers to commonly asked questions. I love to do that. So I don't know if any of y'all have heard of Glassdoor, where you can go on there and look at different companies. People will go on there and actually post some examples of questions that they were asked in an interview with that company. I did that for Amwins before I had my first interview. I did all my research. I was on Glassdoor websites, not only what do current employees think, but people who've interviewed who maybe didn't get the job. What did they think of the process? What were some questions that were asked? One of the biggest things about interviewing is that you kind of trip over your own words, you get a little bit flustered. We touched on this in our last presentation. Prepare those answers, but also practice them. You've got to get in front of a mirror and talk to yourself and listen to yourself speak. You will be so shocked at how when you're nervous in an interview and you sit down and you start talking and you're getting in your head and you're going, oh my gosh, do I really sound like that? What am I saying right now? It's word vomit and it's all coming out and you kind of lose sense of yourself. It happens a lot and it's normal. You're human. You get nervous. And guess what? The interviewer is nervous too. I get a little butterflies anytime I talk to a new candidate. It's just human nature. But preparing for it, doing your research ahead of time, getting in front of that mirror, hearing yourself speak, relaying those questions. If you want to go a step further, find a buddy you trust to do a little mock interview with each other and kind of practice. It's nerve-wracking, but you're going to have to do it either way. So doing it with someone you trust, who can give you honest feedback so you can land that dream job, makes a big difference.
And something I actually recommend is reaching out to people with similar jobs on LinkedIn. Just pick their brains. Like, what was your process? How did you overcome that? What should I prepare for? You know, it not only helps you get comfortable, but it also helps you expand your network.
Absolutely. I really wish I would have done that at the start of my career. It's when someone isn't doing what you want to do in your personal life, like you don't have a family member or friend, someone close to you who does the job that you want to do. Sometimes it's like, well, I don't know how to connect with people who have my dream job. Don't be afraid to send them a connection on LinkedIn. I know I love that. And put a little message. Hi, I'm so-and-so. This is my major at this school, and I'm really interested in what you do, and it's something I think I want to pursue, and I'm working on building, these set of skills. Is there any advice maybe you could give me? Anything I could learn from you to help better prepare me? And you never know, it could launch into, hey, yeah, here's my cell. Give me a call. Let's chat. Let's set up a video chat. You never know where that connection could take you. Putting yourself out there is huge. You take a shot on yourself. You never know. You could be landing that dream job from trying to make that connection with someone and learn from them.
And then the next step is, just how do you answer those questions? And we really recommend using the STAR methodology, which we'll go into in the next slide. But it just helps you have an organized, clear answer to where the interviewers don't have to be like, okay, I get that, but what happened, or what happened next, or it doesn't have to be extra questions to get the full understanding of what actually happened. So it just helps create that clear, concise thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and prepare several hard copies of your resume to take along. You never know how many people you're going to meet along the way. Don't be afraid to pass it out. I love getting resumes all the time, especially at events like this. It really shows your interest. So, bring lots of, multiple copies so you can hand it out to as many people as, are going to be interviewing you. You never know who's going to be in the room.
And I see a lot of you have the portfolios. Take that along. It has a notebook. It has a slide or a section for your resume. It has a pen. Take notes during the interview. It's okay to break that eye contact, to write notes. It shows that you are interested. You want to remember what the conversation was, or, if you want to do more research. It also allows you to write down the questions ahead of time. So if you get a little flustered in interviews, you don't have to remember, what was I thinking, or what did I want to answer or ask. It has it down there for you. And if you have examples you want to talk to in the interview, have that, just so it's a little mental note that hey, yes, this is a great thing I'm proud of. I want to speak to it.
Absolutely. Oh, have a reliable pen, small notepad. Yep, absolutely be ready to take some notes, maybe make a list of some points you want to hit in case you are someone who gets flustered. And hey, if you get a little flustered in an interview, write a little positive note to yourself at the top of your notebook. I like those little psychology tricks. I was a work and organizational psychology major, so I love stuff like that. Write a little note for yourself to pump yourself up. So if you find yourself in a moment where you're like, I'm losing track of this, I don't know if this is going right, you're getting in your head, you can look down on it and go, I got this.
So the STAR methodology, I heard from a few of you students that your professors go over this. Is that correct? Okay, cool. So we're not going to go super in depth. It's just, it allows you to address the situation, talk about, what you're doing, how you're going to go about finishing it, and then what the results are. So it's pretty self-explanatory. If anyone has questions, definitely let us know.
It's definitely easy to speak about yourself in kind of a general sense, a kind of surface level overview of who you are and your skills, but this is really just letting you dive a little bit deeper, taking your practical experience, professional, academic, life experience, and tying your skills to certain situations. What we're really looking for is to see how are you demonstrating what you're saying you can do in your actual life. You're talking the talk, but we want to hear, how have you walked the walk in your life? Oh, and I think we should touch on framing it in a positive.
Yes.
Framing it in a positive manner.
Yeah, so a lot of times, we ask questions on teamwork. We ask questions about, why are you leaving your job? Don't ever paint the photo that's negative. You don't want to be perceived that way. Always spin it, hey, it was a great opportunity to start off. It's just not where I see myself going long term, so I'm looking for new opportunities. Always talk in a positive manner, present yourself in a positive manner. That's going to help you really stand out. And, I think all of us, anytime someone's interviewed, you definitely got some of those negative comments, and that just doesn't really stick well with you. So, the more positive you can be, just the better, more people want to be around that.
Yeah, we may ask you situational things like, tell me about a time where you had to work on a project or something with someone whose personality didn't really mesh with yours. How did you kind of handle that? Like Jennifer said, being able to spin those situations into a positive and saying, yeah, it was challenging. Sometimes it can be difficult to work with someone who's different from you, but it was a learning opportunity for me. It helped me to develop, my team building skills, helped me to get a little bit more personable, helped me to maybe have a tougher skill. You know what I'm saying? Like it can really make it positive. So don't be afraid to spin things.
And then just some tips for a successful interview. So first one is obviously be on time. Be dressed to impress. You don't want to show up as soon as it starts. You want to be there 10, 15 minutes early. You get collected, you might get some water, just be able to be prepared and calm. The worst thing is go into something last minute being frantic and start spitting out words. You want to be confident, you want to be in a calm manner before you actually start the interview itself.
Absolutely, and it really shows good time management, which is going to be important no matter what industry you decide to go in. I know I'm from a military family, and we always say if you're on time, you're late. So I am always like 30 minutes early to anything that I do. We got here like an hour and a half early today just to prepare. Give yourself that time, not only just to show the interviewer, hey, I'm here, I'm ahead of schedule, I'm ready, but also for yourself. Give yourself some decompression time. Interviews are nerve-wracking. You're going to be nervous, you're going to be sweating, your mind's going to be racing. Get into the office, sit down in the chair, give yourself some time to take a deep breath, read your positive little note that you're going to write at the top of your notebook. Maybe, message a friend who's supportive and they'll be like, go, you got it. Whatever you've got to do to kind of collect yourself and get yourself in the right, headspace to take on that interview. And I think that just comes with giving yourself time. There's nothing worse than running behind for something, your tie's all undone or your skirt's all twisted and your pantyhose aren't pulled up all the way and you're running into the car and it just doesn't set your interview off with the right tone. So absolutely being prepared, being on time.
And dressing for success. We touched a little bit on this last session, but dress for the industry, for the job you want. Don't dress for what you currently have. You can really present yourself in a lot of different ways, but as long as it's in a positive and reflective manner is what you want, that's going to go a long way.
Absolutely. And then it doesn't mean that you can't have personality in your dress as well. I know we think professional dress and we think, okay, black suit and tie or, black pencil skirt and a white button down, and those are gorgeous and look classic on everyone. But if you want to jazz it up and add in your personality, that's okay too. You are an individual and it's okay to showcase that while dressing professionally.
The handshake, I'm sure all of you learned this in your classes. Never shake someone's hand sitting down. Always stand up, maintain eye contact, smile. Smile goes a long way. People love to see happy people, and usually when someone smiles at you, you usually get it back. So really just show that you are confident, put your best foot forward. Yeah, and don't be embarrassed to be nervous. I mean, we were both butterflies before all of this, just like, oh my gosh, we're in front of people. It's natural. It's gonna happen. You're gonna stutter. You're gonna have, some people get blushed. I get blushed. I'm sure you do too. But it's natural. It's gonna happen. The more you get outside your comfort zone, the more comfortable you're gonna get.
Absolutely. And just remembering that you and the interviewer, you're both human. I touched on this earlier. I still get butterflies before an in-person interview or when I pick up the phone to call someone. It's just human nature when you're talking to a new person, but that really helped me in my interviews for roles. It's just kind of thinking like, this is a human being I'm talking to. And they're probably a little anxious too talking to someone new. It kind of helps to break that ice in your mind and, take some of the pressure off.
You need to remember, we all interview. That's part of getting a job. We all started having our first interview. That's part of the process. So, we go through it. Don't be nervous.
Tell the truth.
Yeah, always tell the truth. Yeah, that goes back to your resume. Don't put lies on your resume, because if it stands out, you're like, oh, that sounds incredible. We're going to ask you about it. And if you can't speak to that, it's going to be a little embarrassing and really show that you might not be the best fit for the job.
Absolutely. And no matter what industry you decide to go in, you're going to quickly find that it's always a small world. Everybody knows someone who knows someone who knows you. And you know someone who knows someone who knows someone else. So when you tell those little white lies or more serious lies on a resume, it can come back. It can come back, and you never know when someone's going to be like, wait a minute, that math isn't adding up. That doesn't make sense. So, always be truthful. And again, even if it's something that may not be as positive of an experience, you can spin everything in a positive light. Just be prepared to tell the truth, but in a positive way.
We touched on this, never talk poorly about others. That's a reflection of who you are as a character as well. So just be positive, be meaningful, be reflective as well. After the conversation, see this went great in this part, but this is where I need to build and really continue to strengthen. So being reflective and positive will take you a long way.
And tell the interviewer if you are interested in the position and company. It's easy to kind of get lost in those interview questions and the dialogue back and forth, but that goes back to kind of the end. And when we're having that more casual conversation and just kind of catching up and seeing where your head is at, don't be afraid to go for it and say, I'm interested in this. This really intrigues me. I want to learn more. I want this position. We like that confidence to see that this is something you really want, that the conversation we've been having, if it's been positive, that it's impacted you as well. And, we get a good vibe there. The sense is going. Don't be afraid to say, yeah, I'm all in for this.
And I personally love when people are straightforward. They tell me what they're thinking, what they want, and that's just going to help you. If we were kind of on the fence, not sure, or we're going to pass you on if you come back, and you're like, I want this job, I want to continue the conversation, that usually kind of gets us over that hurdle and puts you in front of the hiring manager.
And even if you find during the interview at no fault of yourself or the interviewer that you're just thinking, I don't know now if this may not be the right fit for me, that's totally okay. That happens sometimes, and that's perfectly all right. You can still end it on a positive note. You can still send that follow-up email saying, hey, just want to thank you so much for your time. I greatly enjoyed the conversation. While this particular role, may not be, the best fit for my skills based upon my reflection, I want to just thank you again for the opportunity and hope that we can keep in touch. Like we've mentioned, your industry is going to be a small, small world. Doing things like that and just ending everything on a positive note, even if it doesn't work out necessarily in your favor, is going to go a long way. You never know when you're going to see someone again. 2 months later, 2 years later, 20 years later, you may be in a position where you need that person or that person needs you. Everything kind of comes back around.
And one of the favorite things as interviewers and recruiters, we love that follow-up email, especially reiterating that you are interested. We love seeing it. It's a personal touch. It just continues to show this person, we were on the same page. We liked what they were saying. They liked what we were saying. We want to continue it. And having that little follow-up note, a couple of days after, it's a nice little surprise. Okay, this person's still thinking, they're interested. Let's do a follow-up with the hiring manager. Are they interested in having a conversation? Just get them back. It helps move the process forward a little bit faster as well.
And sometimes as recruiters, our hiring leaders will ask us, hey, I really liked so-and-so. Did they follow up with you? And we may go, no, we never really heard from them again. They might ask when you're talking to a recruiter, that hiring leader that recruiter is working with, or the hiring leader themselves, they might be on the lookout for that. It never hurts to send that quick, just thank you email, and it just, puts you in a good mood too. It's you end that on a positive note. That's so important.
And most companies use applicant tracking systems, which is where we store your information. So every candidate that's ever applied to a position has their own little page in that system. Any type of conversation, whether it's an email or a missed phone call, it goes into that system so we can refer back. If you apply in a couple of years, this name sounds familiar, we'll look at your resume, we'll look at your profile, we'll see, did this person follow up, were they interested, what happened, why we weren't pursuing them. So it helps you, Sevin said, it will always be an evolving conversation at some point.
I love that you touched on that, because I think not a lot of people, but definitely not a lot of students know that we're keeping track of you and what you've said and done. We have kind of a record of that. So if you find in the future you really want to go back to a certain opportunity or a certain company, that again is why it's so important to end on that positive note, because we will go back and we will look at those records. How did they come across to someone else, or what was their resume like, or we will dig into that to see kind of what went on. So seeing those positive notes, even if you don't end up getting the job, even if you find the opportunity is not right for you, if you've left it on a positive note, we are much more likely to reach out to you again for another opportunity. And I think that's all we have.